Hello, everybody. First of all, I'd like to announce that I might be coughing, not purposely, but I'm still in that cold situation, and I hope I won't disturb you too much. So, I would like to start by the title, which is Trial Transparency Towards the Greater International. It doesn't seem to move. It doesn't seem to move. So I would like to encourage you and get you excited about what we can do now as short-term efforts for long-term benefits and introduce the CIHR Trial Policy 2010, which is updated policy from 2004. Um, so the outline basically of my presentation is prospective trial registration, public disclosure of trial results, international aspects, and CIHR trial policy. The heads there are indicated. I'll wear several different hats during this presentation, not just the CIHR hat. So we are talking about health research information, which consists of research material, I'm sure most of you are aware of, research data and results and findings. Results can be summary level or aggregate data, which is what you usually see in publications, and individual participant or micro level data, raw data, which you practically never see unless you did it. And then we have findings, which are so exciting because they interpret numerical data, but that's also a danger of the way of interpretation and the way of which data are chosen to be interpreted. So that's where the bias comes in. So knowledge sharing initiatives are as old as the research is. So I'm starting just with the new ones, but people always wanted to share what they learned through their research. And then journals started publishing them, and then peer-reviewed journals appeared, and everything was great. But then it was realized that that might not be enough. And there was a call for open access journals, which are available free online, free of charge. Then we had push for that through Budapest Open Access Initiative in 2002, which called for self-archiving, which most of us do through PubMed, open access peer-reviewed journals. And then Berlin Declaration said, well, let's go further and ask for individual patient data and raw data, original scientific results and metadata. And then in the let's say developing world perspective was expressed by Salvador Declaration of Open Access, by calling for scientific information to be openly accessible and freely available to all forever. I'm sure you know of some other knowledge sharing initiatives, but this is just a summary. So why do we want it? We would like to build new knowledge on all the knowledge, not just partial. And there are numerous ethical and scientific imperatives. Current system of reporting is suboptimal and inefficient in the internet era. You all know that sometimes with peer review process it takes up to 2 years to publish. Technology currently enables it, so we can do it. And we hope, particularly in this area, to overcome publication and outcome reporting bias and thus enable independent review. So let me just go back to bias to make sure we think about the same thing when I mention it. We are talking about outcome reporting bias, which is selective reporting of results when you either report only statistically significant results, or results that confirm what you would like to confirm. And the publication bias is selective publication of trials. We all know that some of the trials are never published, either because they had negative results or they had no results in terms of changing the hypothesis. So now, why do we want to talk about clinical trial, which is, by the way, a prospective, controlled or uncontrolled research study evaluating the effects of one or more health-related interventions, so it's always prospective, assigned to human participants. The reason we talk about it is that clinical trials are considered in the pyramid, which you see in the background of evidence, to be the most reliable source of evidence for clinical and medical decision making. Nowadays we added systematic reviews of those trials at the top, but that's why we are interested to have them really high quality there. So we thought we would improve and overcome bias partially, and we can contribute to that by the tool called trial registration. The components of trial registration are unique ID assigned to a trial that you should be used in any further communication, prospective registration and public release of protocol, and registration or public release of results. So protocol then is a document which is written before trial participant enrollment to describe objectives, methodology, statistical analysis, organization, and administrative details of trial. And of course, in many trials, it changes throughout the trial, which is required sometimes, but it should be reported. So the historically looking, the thinking of about the trial registration started a long time ago, but the major trigger was 2004, when New York City put Glaxo on trial for hiding results, and the settlement including agreement to register trials prospectively. Medical journal editors, members of the ICMJE, International Council of Medical Journal Editors, felt partially responsible, I would guess, and said we will not from now on publish results of trial unless it was registered. And then we thought at CIHR that this will definitely change the life of our researchers that we fund. And we used the opportunity of Cochrane Colloquium being held in Ottawa and called people for the meeting to discuss it, and ended up developing the Ottawa Statement Part 1, which is calling for trial registration and results reporting. That one was published in the BMJ, and it's available on the CIHR website and on the Ottawa Group website. So WHO then had a ministerial meeting, which is held every 4 years in Mexico, which came up with a recommendation that WHO ministers recommended WHO to start working on trial registration. And indeed, at the World Health Assembly, one of the resolutions was enabling that happen. ICMJE, again, journal editors supported that activity and recommended again with the next statement that it should be happening. We then met again as Ottawa Group, and looked into implementation of the statement. And this is now, you can see the site of the Ottawa Group website, where many other documents are. WHO organized the working group, which was 2-3 working groups. One of them was scientific advisory group that I was lucky to be part of, and we developed Ottawa WHO standards, which were launched in 2006. And they contain those famous 20 items you have to register, criteria for the registry, and other details like when and which trials. We then met again for Ottawa Group, and developed the Ottawa Statement Part 3 of implementation of results. And then journal editors supported the WHO standards and defined the dates by which they really want people to have everything registered. And that was really the major trigger to happen. So I listed some of other stuff which are happening in the area, like other journal editors and libraries, and then FDAA, which I'll touch later on, and then WHO continued with Portal, RELEM, and the Declaration of Helsinki and Euro. So Declaration of Helsinki was being revised in that same time, and it included trial registration and results disclosure in much stronger terms than the previous version. So these are WHO international standards. They call for registration of all trials, assignment of unique ID. The registration should be done prospectively, meaning before recruitment of a first trial participant, and at least the minimum data set of protocol, those 20 items, should be registered, and they define the registry criteria. These are the 20 items data set. I usually say that the first 10 are more or less administrative, describing who does what, and the second part, actually from official scientific title, talk more precisely about the way the trial will be done, I mean, reflecting the protocol. So it's countries of recruitment, condition, interventions, inclusion-exclusion criteria, study type, starting date, target sample size, recruitment status, primary outcomes, and key secondary outcomes. If you want to see details of how this really has to be reported, you should check the WHO website, which elaborated. It's not just simply like this. So WHO continued and developed search portal and network of registries. So the search portal is the way to go to search portal. You can reach any WHO acceptable registry through that portal and see trials registered there. And they also work with WHO Registry Network, trying to develop best practices and improve the way that registries are done and help new registries being formed. So this is the list of current trial registries that are so-called primary registries, are those that meet all the criteria of standards. And let's say one of them is RSTCM, which is one of the oldest, and CIHR used to register there only. And if you go there, you'll see the list. You can type CIHR in the search button and you can see all the trials that are registered by us. And then if you open each of them, you'll see that they follow the list of the items that are required by the international standards. And this one, like all the other registries, would sometimes add another item to the list. So you might wonder, if we now have the trial registry which gives all the details, not all, but many details of trial protocol, why are we not happy with trial registration and publication of results in a peer-reviewed journals? It's well, because first of all, we need to regain public trust, and trial registration is just one of the tools. We would like to build on all knowledge, we said, not just on partial, and so we need results. We would like to have access to raw data to be able to reanalyze in case something strange happens afterwards. Current system, we believe, is suboptimal and inefficient in the internet era, and still sponsor controls clinical trials if it's only registration and no results disclosure. So altogether, we can say that without results disclosure, reporting trial registration is an unfulfilled promise. So let me now go back to trial results reporting initiatives, which started, let's say, with Ottawa Statement Part 3 in 2006. And if you go to the right-hand side of this slide, you will see that after trial was registered initially on the left side, and the Ottawa Statement proposes to add items to 20 items WHO. And please pay attention to the last item on the left-hand side of the Ottawa Statement 2 is systematic review. CIHR, like many others, considered systematic review to be essential to justify the new trial, so we require it. And then during the trial you do some disclosure of data, and then at the end we thought, okay, let's start with the Ottawa Statement 3 says, let's start with concert plus all the items we indicated in Ottawa Statement 2, indicate really all sites and countries, any independent validation of results, meaning peer reviewing, and list of any publications. But then we said that's not enough. Let's get systematic review after the trial and individual participant level data set. So other reporting initiatives, and I'm sure you are aware of much more to what I listed, would be the first Latin American Conference on Health Research in Rio de Janeiro, which called for sharing of data, Declaration of Helsinki that we already mentioned, and then regulators. The famous one is VDA of the US in 2007, calling for results disclosure in special designed fields. Euro moved on to that level in 2009, and many others, like Australia recently, etc. Journal editors like ICMJE, PLOS, BMJ, annals with this reproducibility, and Biomed Central, which is moving further, even trying to put them on. Funding agencies and PROCTOR. PROCTOR was public reporting of clinical trials, outcomes and results that CIHR organized in 2008, an international meeting. And you can read about it on our website, and also it was published, a short report in Croatian Medical Journal. Unfortunately, the full results of that meeting hasn't been published yet. It's still in the process. So PROCTOR discussion topics we asked people to prepare in advance, and we asked really all the stakeholders we could think of. And so we asked people to think and send us in advance the information what they and their group of people they cover would think about why, for whom, when, which trials, how much detail, what format, who is responsible, who will monitor the quality, accountability, what the website should look like, who should and should not fund, and who should or should not run those websites or depositories, and barriers. So basically, Proctor's discussion topic was trying to get to the fact that to understand what we need to do to achieve the universal results reporting. So then we said, okay, the challenges we have to overcome to get there would include intellectual property, especially the TRIPS in our area, privacy and de-identification, technical issues, levels of information for different users with various levels of access, which is linked to the previous privacy and intellectual property, and pre-publication, which is more or less being addressed by journals and getting more and more relaxed. So basically, in privacy and transparency, we try to understand what we need to do to achieve the universal results reporting, to have the best possible transparency so we can reanalyze and then at the same time not to endanger somebody's privacy. So Khaled I borrowed this from Khaled, or he lent me to use it. It shows the levels of trade-off between high security and trusted recipients. That's related to what I mentioned by saying that there are levels of the users. So if you have a high trusted recipient who has a strong security and privacy practices, and the data are not so sensitive, and consent is sought or authority, no motives to re-identify, then you can give more information and less depersonalized. And on the other side, you'll have very public use, and then you have much more concerns that something might be breach of the privacy. So then you have to have significant de-identification. So CIHR, then let me go to CIHR's thinking. So we are funder, and we promote open access of research we fund and trial registration culture as consequence, not just trial registration culture. And so we are looking in the trial registration area. We decided to work on international standards and get us trialists registered there versus national registry. So the development of CIHR trial policy can be traced to 2002-03 at least, when the decision was made, and the thinking went that when we fund a randomized control trial, it started with randomized control trial, we would like it to that all the new knowledge moves to innovation in clinical practice, but we observed that some knowledge is silent and it never goes there. So we decided to attack it by developing database, registration of trials internationally, and asking for final report. So then we did outcome reporting study with Anwen, which showed that our trials were also had a reporting bias. Then CIHR trial database was formed to capture information so we can help researchers and ourselves understand and, let's say, overcome this problem. And so we've been asking people to provide information which we put in database on basic protocol information before, during, and at the end of a trial. And then we launched the CIHR policy in 2004 and started registering all randomized control trials with the RCCN. And as I mentioned, we had a Ottawa Group dialogue, Mexico Summit, WHO Trial Registration Project, PROCTOR dialogue in 2008, and Declaration of Helsinki, which were all, we used that experience from there to make our policy. So that's, let's say, reflection on the Declaration of Helsinki. We wrote about it. And then FDA or USA side, when they were developing expansion, expanding their trial registry and developing results disclosure fields, they opened up to consultation broadly beyond even USA, and we commented to their work suggesting development of international standards. Then, let's say, we collaborated with several colleagues and provided the Advisory Committee on Health Research with the briefing note on prospective registration. So let's go to trial policy. So you can find it on the website. Let's say you go to apply for funding, and you find all the policies that apply. Not all of them will apply to all grants because it depends which grant you do, but basically all of them you have to follow if you get our money. So this is the policy on registration and result disclosure of controlled and uncontrolled trials funded by CIHR, which is updated policy from 2004. So the objective is to increase transparency and accessibility of trials by prospective registration and disclosure of their results. It's expected to help reduce publication bias and fulfill ethical responsibilities to share knowledge gained from trials. So it consists of actually 4 parts, let's say. Prospective registration of trials, that's once the trial is approved for funding, we expect you to register it. Public disclosure of trial information during trial, and public reporting and disclosure of trial results, and data retention. So according to the first one, prospective registration of trials, grantees are required to register all CIHR funded trials following the 2006 WHO international standards plus ethics approval and a systematic review. We as CIHR keep the right to ask researchers to add some items to 20 items of WHO. Currently that consists of ethics approval, which is only for the main site or one site per country, and systematic review to justify trial. And as of recently, we now have a registry of systematic reviews where these systematic reviews can be posted if there is no space on the registry, but it should be indicated on the trial registry. Register trial only once, please, because otherwise it gets a confusion, might be counted several times, and provide CIHR with the name of registry and ID that's assigned. Then, according to during trial, grantees are required to update trial information in the registry, report to CIHR and the registry all major changes of the protocol, and of course approved by ethics board within 30 days, and report to CIHR and the trial registry early stopping or termination of a trial within 30 days. At the end, grantees are required to submit concert-based report to CIHR using the most recent concert. If the trial is not randomized and thus cannot use the concert, then the trialists should use the CIHR end of grant reporting system. Then of course you have to comply with all the other CIHR policies, including policy on access to research outputs, which means you have to publish and put in PubMed, submit trial results to publicly accessible results data bank, and post summary data and micro-level data, individual participant level data on an unbiased, freely accessible website. Currently, according to our knowledge, that's mainly for aggregate data, people mainly go to clinicaltrials.gov, which is US-based NIH-linked website. And the micro-level, participant-level data set, we are not aware of any international standards as yet, and of any repository that would meet these criteria, so we are working on it to see how to develop that or contribute to that development and test that happening. So currently we are asking individual participants keep data and report any severe adverse events or harms. And then of course at the end, grantees are required to retain all trial information, so that for 25 years, unless they are deposited in a freely accessible data repository. That coincides with the Health Canada's regulation for randomized trials, but we just expanded it. So this way, trial policy of 2010 complies with WHO international standards, with requirements of medical journal editors, not just ICMJE, but all the other groups like Council of Science Editors, World Association of Medical Editors, and others, Declaration of Helsinki, and we therefore believe that it contributes to global initiatives to increase accountability of publicly funded health research. So now we are looking into policy implementation. And this webinar is, I hope, will help with some discussion that we are moving on to afterwards to help us understand what are the items or issues we have to cover in policy implementation. So we are working on it internally, of course, with updating our procedures, enabling the data to be uploaded through the ResearchNet, etc., then nationally we are going around and informing the research community and getting into dialogue with it. We aim to do some research on how does that happen and what should be done, and we shall develop learning modules to help researchers understand how we expect them to really implement this policy. But at the same time, we shall continue our work internationally, and we are communicating with and exchanging with others and with dialogue, and do the research, and also hopefully engage with others to develop international standards and results repositories. So I would like to acknowledge various stakeholders, and of course colleagues at the CIHR, the researchers throughout Canada, internationally, people that contributed to Ottawa Statement and Proctor meetings, and apropos media for developing these slides. So I ended a little bit earlier because I thought I wouldn't, and so I would like to see whether we can answer some questions. I hope those of you that had problems with technical problems managed to overcome them. Several people said they couldn't hear anything. So let's now see the questions. Is CIHR considering, okay, I have to read the question because you don't see it. Is CIHR considering hosting a micro-level database of clinical trial results? Oh no, not yet, not now. We hope that should be, trials are international. And so we hope to help develop international standards and help develop thinking which level of results and of raw data in which way should be posted. So we don't aim to develop any repository. That's a nasty one. The second question is there a strategy to bring privately funded clinical trials on board with this policy? Well, we hope that institutions, when it's co-funded by us, it's easy because then researcher or institution are obliged to. Otherwise, we hope that this will provide the inspiration to others to follow up, and it's in line really largely with international happening, and they will also, I believe, industry will find it useful to have more information and bigger knowledge sharing happening. Is there any CIHR requirement for grantees to report that their phase 1, 2 or 3 has been authorized by Health Canada as required under the Food and Drug Regulation Division 5 and the Natural Health Products Regulation Part 4? I think that goes automatically. You can't do the study unless this is done, but I don't know of anything specific about it. It should be there. The same kind of problems exist in other types of studies. Are there any plans to extend the registry to non-trial observational studies? Well, my dream is that all the research become publicly available, especially publicly funded research becomes publicly available. And I know that recently CIHR co-signed the agreement with big funders, and the project is led by Wellcome Trust, trying to move with larger data sharing of population studies, which would include a lot of observational ones. And by the way, observational studies in this area of clinical research can be registered even now with the clinicaltrials.gov. They open up. Any other? Let's see other questions. Do clinical trial registries data sets include the informed consent forms for participants? Consent form has been asked by many people to be included, including as well as the Ottawa Group, but 20-item data set, minimum data set of international standards, does not require that. Okay, that's an interesting question. Rather than posting the microdata online, why not identify trusted third party that could be the repository and which would not release data until ethics approval and user agreements are in place between the custodian and the user? But posting data on online doesn't mean you just post it online. It means you post it in some trusted repository. So, as I mentioned earlier, that repository would then display data regarding on levels that need to be depersonalized, so that it wouldn't be dangerous, so to say, for individuals. So some people are discussing additional ethics approval, but if you follow the regulations, you probably don't need another additional ethics approval, although it would be a matter of scientific integrity, let's say, to inform your trial participants that you would be reusing or posting the data which can then be reused. Okay, then the question is, might research data sharing be part of a new MOU with institutions? That would be lovely. But it might happen that the new MOU will be based on Tri-Council, and so we'll have to see how it will be, which part. The policy should be part of the MOU anyways, because it's our policy. So we shall see what happens with that. Basically, it's based on Tri-Council, which includes trial registration to details. It's what percentage of cities are publicly funded? Very small, and I do not have a number. Much larger percentage of especially randomized trials that one can trace roughly through Health Canada are funded by pharma industry. We shall learn through this process how much more we fund. Another question is CIHR in discussion with Health Canada to have non-CIHR privately funded grants registered for drug trials? According to what I remember last is that Health Canada is recommending registration of trials with one of the WHO approved registries, which would include then also privately, but only recommended. We do not have regulation like Americans have that you have to, like FDA is required, so we only recommend. Okay, the question is, consider requiring in the consent form a notification that information will be posted for other researchers to use. Yeah, we are talking about it these days, but I think the whole consent form, this is my hat, which has a private opinion on the top, is that the consent form should have been looked at and somehow standardized and somehow made more reader friendly and etc. But definitely it should consist of it should include the number of trial which is registered, so people can go to registry and look for it, and also that the information will be posted for researchers' use. Can Health Canada require this policy to be followed by all trials approved by them, including privately funded trials? I'm afraid you have to ask this question to Health Canada. I can't answer. Is it a full systematic review required or something short of this for each study? Full systematic review requires a huge time and resources. This might encourage sloppy reviews which purport to be full systematic reviews. Well, we initially thought that for randomized trials we would require only consent-based, but decided that we don't have to require consent-based reviews. But systematic reviews are also going through a very thorough upgrading of quality, And don't forget that systematic review, you give it as a part of application, will also be looked at by peer reviewers. And besides, if you go to um, I learned last week, and it was launched yesterday. It's called Prospero. It's a registry of systematic reviews to help researchers not to redo review if it's done, because you don't have to do systematic review. You can use existing one if it's not too old to justify the trial. It seems the question is, it seems that the repository have similar characteristics to biobanks. Will CIHR develop rules for establishment and oversight of these repositories, including ethical oversight requirement? We shall take this question back home, because we are now in the process, as I mentioned, to implement this trial policy, and such comments are very useful to us to develop it, because don't forget the trial policy gets into effect with the next launch of applications, which is in next month. So the new trials will be approved, and they will start within this year, and they won't finish until a year or 2 years later. So we have time to develop some of this thinking. But for the time being, until we have a good repository, we shall ask people to keep their data. Okay, the next question is, when will the learning modules start coming out? Well, it's almost the same answer as previous. We are currently collecting people's input to develop learning modules. The first learning module we anticipate to come up will be about registration, prospective registration of trials, because that will be the first one that will be to be used upon approval, which will be this spring. And then we should continue with other 2 modules, and we might be updating them as the life shows the need and we do the research. So you should expect the learning modules to start coming very soon. And by the way, if I didn't answer your questions, you can always ask them later on from CIHR, because my email address is at the bottom of the policy on the CIHR site, and I'm very interested in input. So the question is, increased transparency of clinical trials up to raw data will benefit the public and increase the responsibility of regulatory agencies, since the public will be part of the review of clinical trials data. Please comment. Absolutely. The increased transparency, as we were dreaming of global full transparency, will certainly benefit the public, because as one of the consumers at our Proctor meeting said, on the question which data, she said all data. Who is it for? Who is it not for? And so it should increase a responsibility of everybody in the process of that enterprise. So the question is, does CIHR expect new applications to describe how they will make data available? That will be very useful if they do. Currently they can indicate, as we call it, knowledge translation plan, but this would be very, very useful if they could describe how they will make data available. Okay, we have a question of what oversight mechanism is CIHR considering verifying full disclosure of data. So currently what we have in place is that if you applied for funding, you got approved for funding, you will not get money, or the money won't be released until you registered your trial. As per the results disclosure, we are working on the mechanisms to make them implemented. And as I mentioned earlier, we believe we have some time to do that. Thank you. Will CIHR cover the cost of preparing data for public release and documenting it? So far we didn't look at it, but I believe we shall, because currently, for example, we ask people to register trials, and if the registry like RSTCN is asking, is charging for that registration up front, then that's eligible cost. So it's eligible cost if you publish in a open access peer-reviewed journal, and you have to pay money for that publication. So I would expect that we should work on it, and thank you very much for this comment. So to see how do we deal with covering the cost of preparing data for public release and documenting it.